Before we begin, I would like to announce that I will be attending the 63rd Annual Convention of the American Society of Dowsers, June 8th through June 11th, being held at the State University of New York Adirondack campus in beautiful Queensbury, New York. The convention will feature dowsing demonstrations and speakers, a metaphysical expo and dowsing bookstore, a wellness center, and much, much more. The Queensbury campus is only 45 minutes north of Albany International Airport, and affordable on-campus housing is available. For more information and to register for this unique event, please visit www.dowsers.org. And now for today's podcast.
Welcome to High Vibes with your host, Bill G. At High Vibes, we're looking into what it means to be a fourth-dimensional being in an ever-changing world. We hope that by listening to our podcast, you can feel a greater sense of peace and connection as we collectively raise our energetic vibration to the next level. And now for today's podcast.
Hello and welcome to High Vibes. I'm your host, Bill G, and today's special guest is Shelly Darling. Now, Shelly is a fellow dowser who's got a long history with the American Society of Dowsers, and she has also written a wonderful book that I had the pleasure of reading called Songline of the Heart, and she's been doing a lot of work with our partner, Jamie Westrom, learning how to do more dowsing in home mitigations and these sort of things. But what I really wanted to talk to her today is about her book and the odyssey and of her life that led her to this wonderful healing practice that she is doing right now. So Shelly, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Bill. Thank you so much. I'm very honored.
What I found so intriguing about the book as I was reading it is that the way that you interwove what you do, the dowsing work that you do and why you do it and how it works into this journey of self-discovery that you had when your marriage was ending and you traveled to Australia and you learned about all of these new energy techniques that you were studying, and it was just a fascinating story. But interwoven in all of that was playing in my eye, you were playing like the part of the traveling shaman teacher learner, and you were learning and teaching at the same time. So where to start on something like that? So okay, well, why don't you just take us into the story in the sense of where were you before you started this journey, and where did it take you?
Okay. Well, first of all, the first word that comes to me is the word navigator, because essentially that was the energy that I was tracking ever since I was a young child. And my dad was a incredible captain and sailor, and navigation, as we all know, is we're all navigating home. We're all navigating into more of who we are, and that really was what I was doing. Was I had, prior to that, where the book begins, I had been working in somatic integration for like 12 years and doing a lot of inner work and a lot of helping people to really mitigate that they are the source of their own experience. And that's a beautiful thing. Not, yes, we experience challenges. And when dowsing came in, it came out of left field. I had no idea. And that literally changed my life. And really, the book really begins there, where I'm having this experience, and basically everything kind of falls apart, as life sometimes does, right? And, husband home, and I had just learned the dowsing as well. So it was very fascinating to look backwards also at how it all played out. And it was really the dowsing in my life that really began to open my life and to help me to align what my voice is. And so that, basically took me to Australia, where my daughter was living. And I think the most important piece around that is it was in Australia where the land started to speak really loudly. And I had never experienced that. Now, I had done a bunch of dowsing, done a lot of people's homes. I, worked with land. It was if you're reading the book, you'll hear that it came out of left field. But when I put those dowsing rods in my hand, I had this experience that I had never had before, which was, I've done this before. And there was such a sense of truing up who I was. It was like, oh my gosh. But it was in Australia where the land really started to speak. And I began to see really the impact that was happening not only in my own life, but in other people's. And that sort of starts the beginning of this journey. And really, like, as we were saying, so it's really the journey of love, of falling in love with oneself and falling in love in direct relationship with the earth, and how we can become more of who we are. And I think that's what I began to see as I was doing the dowsing, that for me, dowsing was maybe a little bit different than people who are focused on water dowsing. It's not that I can't do that. It's not my forte. Really, my focus really began to be about the transformational change when I'm walking with someone and dowsing their house, and how there's a quickening. And that's what, little by little by little, I began to experience. And when the land started speaking really loud, it was that deeper reverence for who we are as human beings and as a humanity in direct relation to the land, to the animals, to the water. That's a pretty big mouthful, and I'll pass it back to you.
Oh, that's cool. Well, it was interesting it seemed like Australia had a deeper energetic connection to you than because you were living like in around San Diego at the time. So when you went to Australia, you seemed, like you said, the land was talking to you. Like it was louder, or it was more clear. Have you? Do you feel as though Australia, you have a deeper connection to that piece of land on the earth than, say, where you are in the US?
I think I did, really, up until about 2 years ago. And the only place I ever really felt home was in Australia. And also because I experienced something there that really shifted my life, where instead of people, being suspicious of you at first, and then they're going to get to know you, and then they're going to open their heart, it was the opposite in Australia. And I think that had a really big influence on my life to, I would call it like a gentling. So yes, but then that impacted how I worked when I came back to the United States, because I had a deeper relationship. And I had time also because I was in my own healing. I was really ill, and I spent a lot of time in nature. And also that was where, I was in a place called Church Point at the Ku-ring-gai Reserve, and you go up there, and there are these 10,000-year-old carvings, and you start to put your feet on that land, and you realize, powerful, or you see a birthing stone. These are very impactful in terms of our relationship to our ancestors, right? And so when we're working with people, or when I'm working with people, it's so much, especially now, really about this direct relationship with the land that you're on, and the ancestral, not just trauma, but who are those ancestors, and what's your relationship, and why are you being called to the house that you're being called to? And
so when somebody buys a house, or buys a piece of land or whatever, and they go to that land, or they feel very attracted to that land, is that usually because there's some kind of ancestral bond to the land, or that there's some sort of a connection that you find?
not everybody necessarily. They're obviously called to that land for some reason, but in the work that I'm doing, what I call it a key line. There's sometimes a direct relationship that has to do with the person's evolution. And there's a message for that person. And it doesn't happen in every single house. Sometimes you might have, a husband and a wife, and the wife, really feels, oh my God, I want to live in this house. But the husband doesn't feel that, or the husband's like, we're moving here. And the whoever the other significant other is, they might not feel like that. So yeah, but I look for that. I think it's really important now, especially where people get to know, the land, and who are the the original people of the land. And yeah, I mean, sometimes what starts to happen is, as a person's awareness opens up, they realize some pieces, or maybe it's in their ancestry or something, that.
Well, you told an interesting story in the book about a house mitigation that you were doing for a woman's really big house, the mansion, and the husband was like this chess master, mathematician, or whatever. And the first thing you noticed was there was some feng shui issues with the house, but the most important thing, that the biggest takeaway that I had, was that there was a sense that the husband's energy was moving elsewhere. And then, a few months later, the husband just left. There was the marriage dissolved after the mitigation actually happened. And some people are like, wait a second, you came in here to fix the relationship. And I say this all the time to people who I do relationship counseling with too. I said, when we're doing the dowsing here, one of two things are going to happen. Either we're going to help improve the relationship, or I'm facilitating a breakup. And both can be done with love. Both can be done from a sense of empowerment and expansion. So I'm guessing that's kind of that was the story that I got out of it too, because the primary client that you were working with also had these things that you were helping her expand. You were helping her connect to where she was, and I thought that was rather fascinating. And something else I find interesting too, just generally in culture, and because especially when you're talking about what I like to call Western New Age or Western Woo, it's people are taking workshops and classes, and they're learning all sorts of really cool energetic expansion work, but still they have to go home. And if the home isn't very harmonious, then you're still going to have problems. I want to read a quote from your book. I think it's around chapter 13 that I thought just nailed it completely. And the quote goes like this: no matter how much training you do, or how many counseling sessions or workshops you take, you always end up coming home to your house, and it will either enhance or limit your outcomes. I thought that was just a wonderful, wonderful quote. So I want to talk about that a little bit, with the home being your nexus of energetic expansion work. And if your home is not in line with your harmonics or your energetic vibration, it's actually going to act as a barrier to your expansion.
Yeah, I would say it a little bit differently.
Okay.
So everything you've been saying is really very much aligned. In fact, I was going like, wait, did my daughter talk to him? Because my daughter, after she had seen some dowsings, and she was like, Mom, I'm never letting my friends come to you anymore. Every time, there's always a breakup. And I'm like, no. Actually, those were the relationships that were on that verge anyway. And the dowsing just anything other than love will show up. Anything other than harmony will show up. What I would say is that if somebody's feeling stuck, or if they're really struggling, what 9 out of 10 times is, for me, this is what I find, is that the house's energy is lower than their own. So it's like, it's more of a glass ceiling, so that there are these people that are trying to expand. They're doing all these trainings or whatever they're doing, but they come home to that house that, right, is not supporting them, right? And so for me, it's really what we want to do is create an environment that more than is harmonizing with the person's energy, because the person's energy also is we're all evolving, right? It's evolving, but we want the house's energy to be so radiant and so uplifting, a higher vibration, that the person actually, you'll see it, as you probably have seen in the dowsing. All of a sudden the person starts to feel, they start being able to feel more safe, more secure, more confident. They start to like be able to put things together more in their awareness. So as you know, if you're looking at a house, let's just say that is a very dense energy, well, what we don't really understand is that doesn't matter how much therapy you go, it's not allowing that being able, so that that person can connect the dots and actually make the change. And I think that's the beauty of to me, transformational dowsing is that you're working alongside the client. And as soon as you start to clear some of the heavier energies of negative vortexes or geopathic stress or some of these other things, that person starts to, their actual literal energetic system starts to open and they become more of a trans receiver for the information that they're so desperately trying to find. I don't know, does that make any sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And a lot of times I find that when they start receiving that energy, they that information, that conscious awareness, sometimes they are not particularly prepared for it.
Right.
So it's like it's more than what they bargained for when they decided to go on this journey in the first place. Although it was part of divine timing. This was supposed to happen within that context.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it can be very jarring. It can be very traumatic, especially when you start learning things about yourself, or you start learning things about your ancestral energy that, oh wow, first of all, I didn't know that, and second of all, oh geez, that's something I need to cleanse, that's something I need to purify, and that purification process can be uncomfortable. Have you ever found a situation when you mitigate somebody's house and you are helping to align their energies, that the conclusion was, this is just not the right place for you to be anymore. You probably need to find somewhere else to be happy.
You know what? That is a great question, a really great question, because I just ran into a similar situation. But this is what I found. I found that and only in 14 years, I've told one person not to be in the house they're in, or to move. And this was they're trying to buy a house. And there were some very, very big things that were wrong with it. But I feel like if that person's in that house, they might in the end choose to leave, but it's fully by their choice. And you can always get a feeling of like, this is a sense of a temporary place, because they're evolving. This house has something to gift that person or that relationship, or it's there to help them wake up, and because as the house starts to open, people start to really begin to trust their intuition. I can walk into a house and I can see if there's a relationship issue. It's like, right, you can see it, you can feel it there, and also having a feng shui background, that helps as well. And because it was the situation it was my personal situation where I realized, I was working with this feng shui master, and about 8 months down the road, I'm sitting in this class and I'm looking at these diagrams, and all of a sudden I start to wake up going, oh my God, you knew the day you walked into my house. And this person said, yes, I did actually.
Yeah.
And that was a great, it was challenging, but it was a great experience. So I feel like, yeah, but mostly in regards to what you're asking, I feel like I don't ever really tell people to move. I mean, if it's like, because you're creating, I feel like at least you're creating a slipstream uh, of love, and at least for me, I'm supporting that person to love themselves and to look deeper, and to, they start to feel, really comfortable in that house, and they might choose to leave, but they're not going to carry the same energy with them into the next house. But
Right.
I mean, like I said, only in 14 years I've ever told anybody to move. And most people that I experience are trying to settle into the place, or they're feeling so uncomfortable. But anyway, that's my experience.
Yeah. Well, in the early 2000s, I bought a house down in New Jersey, and I was very excited about buying. It was my first house, and the a friend of ours who does feng shui came into the house and was like, "Are you kidding me?
Right.
What the hell were you thinking when you moved in here?" And it was, and over the 7 years that we lived there, we had lots of problems. We had problems with my relationship with my wife. We had problems with relationships with our friends. And we also had problems with relationships with the neighborhood. And on top of that, the house apparently was sitting on a junction of two ley lines. And so it was Grand Central Station for non-physical entities. And so it was not a fun place to live. And in the end, when the foreclosure crisis came along, the house was underwater, and I ended up having to foreclose on it. So there was a lot of really deep, dark, stuck energy in the house that thankfully we left it. But you bring up a very interesting point here, because if it wasn't for living in that house, I would have never gotten into dowsing.
Interesting.
So it was because I learned dowsing to help mitigate the energies that were constantly passing through the house, the stuck energies. And for a while I was living there and doing the dowsing work, well, I was able to raise the vibration of the place so that way we could be more harmonious. It didn't really go to hell in a handbasket until after we left. And that's when the house got broken into. That's when it sat vacant for 5 years and just became all overgrown and horrible. I mean, the house is okay now because somebody else bought it and decided to, fix it up. But it was just a fascinating journey,
Mm.
because that journey then first, number one, got me into dowsings, and that changed my whole life. And number two, it taught both Nina and I how to look at places that we potentially want to live in, and it opened up our awareness of, okay, when we walk into a place, immediately let's listen to how it makes us feel. Let's listen to how our energies mesh with this. Is this some place that is going to be uplifting for us? Is this some place that's going to be harmonious for us? Or is this some place that is going to be the opposite of that? And so immediately now, every time we moved a lot of places, and the house we're living in right now, we've been here for over 8 years now. And the second we walked into the house, we were like, this is our place. That is all there is to it. And the owner was like, well, there's one other person who's looking at the place, and they're very close to putting in a deposit and whatever. It's like, well, it doesn't matter, because this is our house. And so we said, okay, well, we're putting in our deposit right now. And if that other person falls through, it's ours. And they were like, yeah, sure. And then 2 days later, the landlord calls up and says, it's yours.
Right.
Because we just knew.
Mhm.
And it was because of that experience in the old house that was the drama house that our energies didn't quite mesh with, that led us in this other path where we are now very aware of our energy. We are very aware of our surroundings, to the point where we walk into a place, we just know. And, this is a house that we don't plan on ever leaving, because even when we think about it, we're like,
Mm-hmm.
nope, this is the place. This is where we are. This is where we feel safe. This is where we feel expansive, and it doesn't matter we're in the middle of Vermont and no one can ever get to us. This is where we are.
Mm-hmm. That's a great story. I think, and I, it's pretty much the same thing. Like with for myself, it's one of the first things I tell people: you will never ever look at another house the same way, because like my goal is to um, input so much information. As I'm dowsing, I'm explaining everything so that that person's consciousness is widen. I like just widening, and they begin to know what it, like you said, what it feels like, what it looks like from the get-go when you're walking up to that front door. And usually the way I'm doing it is like, this is I'm going to give you an experience of what I'm experiencing. I'm going to transmit to you so that you're going to now become aware going up to your friends' houses, or you can have a sense of, and it's just a beautiful thing to watch people really begin to understand a house is a conscious being. It's made up of energy. It wants to support us. And that's a whole different, it's not like you're walking up and talking to your house, but you could, essentially you are, when we open the house, people begin to have a sense of, of what it feels like to be in resonance with a place, the spirit of that place, like you're describing. So yeah, it's amazing.
Can you describe some of the tools that you use when you go into a house? So what are the because in the book you talked about these copper rings that you use and that sort of thing. So I just want our listeners to get an idea of what kind of tools that you use and why do you use them?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm always experimenting and open with, there's huge array of tools now. I love, especially when I'm going to a house, I love people to experience some of these, like you were talking about the tensor rings. So originally the tensor rings were, as far as my background is, it was devised by and designed by Slim Sperling, like a shamanic cowboy of sorts, and who really understood sacred geometry and the pyramids and created these rings. So I like to call them a portable positive vortex. So if you're in a house and you can't get someone to douse, or you're not sleeping, these rings will create a positive, let's just say a positive field of energy that allows your body to relax and heal. And so these rings come in all different sizes. And when I first started out, I was using them all the time. In fact, I was traveling with at least 5 or 6 of them on airplanes, and people were going like, oh, are those metal hula hoops, or, great talking pieces. But that's how they're used. And they're also, I would use them, let's just say when I go into a house, if I immediately find a negative vortex, because a negative vortex drains the immune system, point blank. There's lots of other things that it does, but it's very hard to heal in a house that has a negative vortex. And so the rings can be placed on the floor, and it opens that field or portal, a column of light, and some people see it, that allows for even entities or earthbound spirits that haven't been able to leave. Let's just say there was a trauma in the house before you bought the house, right? So the rings are really great for that. So those are the rings. Those are some of the things that I use. I'm also using crystals, but I use them in a particular way. A beautiful woman, and it's always connections of people. That's how things come to me. And way back in, I guess it was like 2009, I met a woman named Catherine Parker, and she had just written a book called Resonance Alchemy, and we started weaving our wisdom together and began to realize that there's a way to incorporate. It's called Kumvita, and you're actually programming the crystals in a certain way that was almost like a Sanskrit language that doesn't get spoken. And I discovered that, yes, I can put the other tools that I use are like copper rods. They're made with the understanding of sacred geometry. They're activated in a certain way, and that can stop the negative energies from coming into your house, or let's call it the stress lines, or the non-beneficial lines energy coming in. But what I discovered, as an example, with the crystals, for a long time I was going out around, putting on these copper rods all wherever the geopathic stress, because you're always looking for where the energy is coming from. And when I started doing these crystal Merkabahs, which is just basically a vessel of light and energy, and that's a whole other topic for people, but for almost 99%, it took care of all the geopathic stress, as long as they were put out in a certain way. And I love to teach people that. So there's a couple of things. So you have I call them earth cures, which are the copper rods, crystals, the rings. I also have been taught a lot of indigenous healing protocols. I'll use that for in certain circumstances and with the house. Also, as you were talking about Jamie, so Jamie and I have come together, and now we're weaving our knowledge and wisdom together. And it's like, always when you do that.
This is Jamie Westrom, right?
Yeah, right. And she's the biofield expert. She's amazing. And so playing with and seeing where the shielding paint, how it works and what else is needed from my experience. So, she's doing kinesiology. I'm using the dowsing rods. And I primarily use the L rods on a sleeve. That's really my choice of tools. So those are some of the different things. And then recently, and then we just together, well, tonight is the Chinese New Year, the black water rabbit. And it's all about, deepening into the dark waters, the still waters of your own being, and coming in to a wondrous relationship with your intuition. And one of the focuses has been about water in my life. That's a whole other topic. So I work with water, and really am about teaching people about watershed wisdom. And we created, or what came to me was this elixir of life for the water and the person. So that it has to be taken. So even though I can go douse the land, what was discovered was when the person takes this, what's called this elixir of life, for their own heart and their own being, combined with doing the soil, something else happens. And so, so we're always kind of playing with some other tools. There's a lot of other ones that you can go to my website and go see some of the other ones. Yeah.
Well, speaking of your website, where can people find you to maybe hire you to do house mitigation or whatever else that you do?
It's evolutionarydowsing.com, and DOWSING. People sometimes try and put in another spelling. Or you can also go to Shelly at shellydarling.com. That's easier. Yeah, it's a fairly new website that's still there are pages that are still attempting to be added on at this point, but yeah.
Right. And the book is Songline of the Heart. And I think you mentioned that you are working on a new edition of this book.
Yeah, it's in its third edition. I mean, right now I think the other thing that I would like to share with people is really my passion. So yeah, this is going on to its third edition, but it's really about my story. And in 2015, I was really nudged to create what's called the Sacred Evolutionary Dowsing Consortium. And my passion is really about heart resonance and how groups can work together. And when we come together, it's more than just the sum of our parts. It's exponential, where there's absolute transparency and honesty and safety. So I've been working for 2 years with the consortium has been going for years, since 2015. But that's really where my attention's going, is to invite people to have the experience of working as a collective, working on people's lands, or landscapes, sites, water. And we've had amazing experiences as a collective. So there are 6 of us that are now working on that and opening it up for other people to have this experience of, what it's like to do dowsing, not just by yourself so that will be made more visible in the next few months.
Where are you primarily located?
In Maine right now.
Oh, you're in Maine. Excellent.
Yeah. I love living in Maine, which was a surprise to me. All those years of going to Australia, New Zealand, and leaving in the winter, all of a sudden I'm back here in winter and actually loving it. Yeah.
So, Shelly, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experiences. And again, her book is called Songline of the Heart. It is available right now on Amazon and everywhere you can buy books. It's also available at the American Society of Dowsers bookstore, so at dowsers.org. So anytime that you want to pick it up, I highly recommend it.
Right.
So again, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you everyone out there for listening, and we will see you next time.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. For more information about Bill and Nina G, please go to www.vitalbioenergetics.com. See you next time.